that's why a lot of people stay with companies, because it's comfort. But I just knew I never wanted that regret, like you talked about, not starting my own company.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point Podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. I'm your host, Jeremy Dyer. I have another amazing guest with me today, Pam Goodwin. Pam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much for having me. I look forward to sharing some information on your podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to the value that you're going to bring the listening audience here. And guys, Pam's got an impressive resume. I'm not going to be able to do it I'm not going to be able to unpack the entire resume, on the podcast today, but other than to just let you know, we've got a veteran on the line here. Pam is the CEO of Goodwin Commercial, which is a boutique brokerage and development company based in Texas. Pam, outside of being on the real estate side, enjoys traveling, visiting family in Croatia, working out and spending time with her husband and two adult sons. So Pam, if you could just maybe, help us learn and understand a little bit more about, kind of your, journey, into entrepreneurship, your journey into real estate, kind of what that's looked like.
I feel like I have been working since I was, 3 years old. I don't know if you're born with it or you end up developing it, but my father and grandfather had a poultry business in Omaha, Nebraska, and I learned at an early age when they were selling baby chicks. My dad was coloring them, but he would buy them for a penny, just put a little color on them, and sell them at Easter time for 50 cents. I'm like, that is a good markup. And I even as a young girl, I was always finding ways to make money. We were doing carnivals. I've always been working for a long, long time. I ended up getting a degree in interior design from the University of Nebraska, did that for about 1 year. And my first half of my career was in large shopping center development on the project management, tenant coordination side, and then went on the landlord side here in Dallas, working for Brinker International. I wanted to get experience on, working for both sides, and went to work for Brinker. At the time, owned 7 restaurants, and I was developing their concept Chili's from the ground up and did more than 50 of those. And I met one of the landlords who was developing them, and I learned by selling a 10-year Chili's ground lease, you could at least make $500,000 to $1 million plus on that one investment. And I was sold on that. So he ended up taking me under his wing. He had like 50 years of experience. And the good thing was, I know a lot of people have a hard time taking that risk of starting your own company. And I always say, if you're not waking up on Monday morning loving what you're doing, you're in the wrong position. I was always switching jobs every 2 to 3 years. And now I've had my own company here in Dallas for 18 years. And I love waking up on Mondays.
I really appreciate that perspective. And it sounds to me like you really kind of found entrepreneurship, or at least started to scratch that entrepreneurial itch early in life. Even going back to, I'm sure, your childhood days, maybe with the lemonade stand, et cetera. So how do some of those maybe early childhood, experiences that you had, and maybe even young adult experiences, how did those experiences shape your approach to business and entrepreneurship?
I know I actually wrote a book on those 25 jobs and 25 lessons learned. because I feel like every single position you can learn something. But even as a young person, I learned about the lemonade stand, the location, makes a difference, how to charge, how to have a partnership. If you include people, then you have to share part of the money, but you can do twice the work. So a lot of those I really learned on early on. And my grandfather and father, who had a very successful poultry business in Omaha, selling a lot of the poultry to all the restaurants, customer service, and standing out and doing something different, really made a difference. And then integrity and trust, goes a long way, and especially now in commercial real estate and doing deals.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate your perspective there on the value of partnerships and, really, I mean, the power of providing service, right, to individuals. I mean, whether you're, an entrepreneur, with a lemonade stand, or you're, managing a poultry business, they're all relationship businesses at the end of the day, right? So, having that proper perspective, and those power of relationships, I could see that being incredibly, powerful for you. Let's talk more about this family, poultry business. What was the transition, in going from, the family poultry business to now commercial real estate, right? Was there a pivotal moment that you kind of realized that real estate is actually your calling?
My dad and my mom both bought a few single family homes, and I did buy one with my mom, and that kind of got me started. But we had an aunt, one of my great aunts, that was really, she was way before her time. And I learned early on that's how she made her money in real estate. And I feel like I definitely have it in my blood. But I love the challenge of real estate. Every single day is different, as you know, in this business, and it continues to change. And I guess my superpower would be, driving around knowing, I'm very observant of, that gas station needs to turn into or that motel needs to turn into Walgreens, or, redevelopment and conversions. With my interior design, I only used it for a year. I wanted to do hotel interior design, and I did get an offer from JW Marriott. And so I've been able to use that design background in a different way. I've never been diagnosed with dyslexia. I think I have it because our son has it, which I think, has that creative way of looking at property in a completely different way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think everybody's got a little bit of a degree of, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, et cetera, et cetera. Some are impacted more by it than others, and some have chosen, to allow it to become their superpower. So appreciate that. I know that you've worked with some pretty, impressive clients, like Walgreens and McDonald's and Chase Bank, to name a few. What do you think has helped you build and sustain, these high profile relationships with those clients?
As you mentioned, it all comes down to relationships and belonging to different groups. I just came back now from a lunch meeting with Deals and Heels. It's a group here of about 60 women, all in commercial real estate. We meet every month, and several of them are national real estate managers. And then I love networking. And I think, sharing some ways, but always attend meetings early, be involved, volunteer to be at meetings. I volunteered yesterday for a couple hours for a golf tournament and met the two head bishops and the two superintendents for the Catholic schools. And that's just how you get to meet people on a personal level. So I really encourage people to start networking, get involved in their community also.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think one of the challenges that maybe, some people have, right, is this challenge of putting themselves out there, right? And that could mean putting yourself out there on social media. It could mean, making a few extra phone calls per day to connect with people that are inside of your network or maybe outside of your network, or it just simply means showing up, right? showing up to events where you're putting yourself in the same room, with the types of people that you want to surround yourself with. So, maybe kind of comment as to, I assume that comes naturally to you, but what type of advice would you give others that maybe are not quite sure, if they should be, taking those risks of really putting themselves out there and showing up?
I know I look back and I'm thinking I felt like I grew up maybe an introvert because I was the one that hated to make a phone call. And, even to call my friends to, if their parents were going to answer, I'd be scared if they answered. So it's so funny that I have to make phone calls to now, even today. And I have to admit, even, being in the business this long, it is not that easy for me to pick up the phone. But I know that if you haven't, if they say if your email is more than 10 words, that you should pick up the phone, and you always learn so much more. But it just, like anything, it just takes practice. And then once you have a couple successes with it, you just continue to do more. And then the older you get, you kind of couldn't care less what people say or think. So it does come with time.
Yeah, I totally would agree with that. I think a lot of it has to do also with confidence, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes people just need to start putting in some reps, right? Just start doing the thing, right? And once you do it over and over and over, a half a dozen times or more, it'll start to become more natural. You'll start to become more confident, right, in your abilities. And I totally agree with you. It seems as though the older we get, the less we care, what other people think. I heard this said from somebody, not to get morbid, but I heard somebody say this at one time, that the greatest regret that people have lying on their deathbeds is that they cared too much about what other people think.
Right. I love that. That's true. I know taking the risk. Even my husband thought I was crazy when I left Brinker. He's like, "You're going to give up that six-figure income. You're going to give up all that free food we get and all the benefits and all that." I mean, that's why a lot of people stay with companies, because it's comfort. But I just knew I never wanted that regret, like you talked about, not starting my own company. And to me, it's been, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And thank goodness I've been able, 18 years, been able to sustain it by pivoting and changing and, lots of different ways.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And I can absolutely resonate with your story, having personally walked away from multiple six figures in a W-2, job, and the annual, quoted club trips and president's club trips. That was very difficult, for me personally to walk away from, right? But now that I've had the opportunity to scratch that entrepreneurial itch that I was born with, I'll never go back. So appreciate your perspective there. I would love to talk a little bit more about kind of on the real estate side. I know that your firm primarily specializes in single tenant, net lease properties. What makes that niche particularly appealing to you, and why do you think it's a good investment choice?
I feel it, being in the single tenant, coming from the Brinker days, I feel it's a really good way for people that want to start investing in commercial real estate. How to get into it. By a lot of people don't know that you can own a McDonald's by doing a ground lease. And the nice thing is they're just paying you rent, they're paying all the expenses and all. I mean, it's like landlord just being able to collect that rent, and they're a lot easier to manage than some of the large, like yourself, the multifamily and the large strip centers. So they're very attractive to investors, and typically under the $2 million mark. One of the properties I had under contract, it was a vacant Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I put it under contract for the less than a purse to buy. It was like $300, and it was $300,000, and we were going to do seller financing. And I think people are surprised of how you can get started in these.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I know that also that, the commercial real estate market is constantly evolving. I would suspect that that kind of, transformation within commercial real estate, in terms of the economic cycles, right, is probably getting shorter, at least as it pertains to the last, decade or two, than it used to be historically. But, how have you and your company been able to adapt your strategies over the years to stay ahead, relative to the shifts in the economic cycles and maybe even, on the competitive front?
No, I've been at a long time. Even once I, was out of college, I hit one of the toughest markets. So I've been able to ride the roller coaster of real estate. And I think that's why my company decided when I started to have different silos. So we do consulting work so that we can get paid, you know, that day. And then we also do brokerage that, can take a little bit longer. And then our main focus is on developing property. So we've kind of had to shift a little bit more brokerage or a little bit more development. This year in 24, the commissions to me, I feel are down. So we've been really focusing on developing and buying property and have a partner. Her and I develop, and like we just recently bought a vacant bank and we're redeveloping that in Birmingham, Alabama.
That's great. That's great. So tell us about, your audio series, which is called "How to Win in Commercial Real Estate: Zero to $1 Million in One Deal." What inspired you to create that audio series, and then what can listeners expect to take away from listening?
I know a lot of people through the years ask me, how do I get started in commercial real estate? And the number one thing they said, I'd love to get started, but I don't have any money. And that's everyone. I think every single person says that. And then I share in this program how I was able to provide the sweat equity, or even today, even if you can't provide the sweat equity, you can find the deal because there's more money out there. It's harder to find the deal these days than the money. There's so much money out there waiting. But the program just really walks you through of how important, visiting your local economic development director in the town, how to find hidden opportunities for property, how to get a hold of these national retail tenants. They're all looking, a lot of them, the ones that are growing. You can read their annual reports and they tell you exactly how many they're closing, how many they're opening. So it just kind of walks you through listening the different steps on how to find that first deal.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a tremendous value to those that choose to participate in listening to that audio series. I know that you're also a coach and an instructor, and you're heavily involved in educating the next generation of real estate professionals. So, what would be one piece of advice that you wish you had personally received early in your career?
Just starting a lot earlier. And the number one thing I tell people is just to ask how to get involved in some of these deals early on. Especially men are, I've been in this man's industry, my whole career. And a lot of women have a really hard time asking. I've been partners in different deals, and I've always been the only women, and I'm like, how come there's no other women? They're like, nobody, you're the only one that asked. And, just ask and look for those deals. Get involved in real estate. Start going. There's so many events, on Eventbrite you can start going to. I mean, you may just start talking to people, start meeting people. Our sons are 23 and 25. And I'm encouraging them to start looking for deals and start investing in real estate right now at a young age.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Get started early. And really your playbook. It sounds to me it's pretty simple. I mean, obviously the devil's in the details, of course, but it's primarily get educated, get networked, and get started. Right? Pretty simple.
That's right. I posted today on LinkedIn. I post it pretty much every day on LinkedIn. And I said, you can keep studying and keep learning, but as a student, you have to take action, so really, taking action is key to anything you want to do, starting a business, or investing in real estate, but just getting started, starting off small and then, still really thinking big on big projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, this before, I've said this many times: analysis paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a real thing, right? But at the same token, eventually you have to start taking action, because it's through action that you actually start to learn the most, right? I can listen to all the podcasts I need to, I can read all the books, I can network with all the people that have done it before. But until I personally start taking action, that's where the real growth and development happens.
Right. I mean, it's just as simple. I always tell, people download LoopNet app and it, anytime I'm traveling or anywhere I'm at, I'll just sit in that parking lot and while I'm, take 5 minutes and put it on for sale and see everything in that area of for sale. Because my motto is everything is for sale. It's just a matter of time and money. But that's a good way to start. And then if you see something, a small building, just take that action. You may be scared to death, but just tell the person, you're looking to buy real estate and you just want to know the price and ask them some questions or just have a few questions and start making those phone calls. And that's just taking those little steps and, set up a goal in the next 3 to 6 months that you're going to have a property, start working on a property and team up with someone.
Yeah, such great advice. Pam, I know that you enjoy traveling. I know that you enjoy spending time with your family. How do you balance all your personal passions with such a successful and demanding career in commercial real estate?
It did take a toll on my health back in 2019, and I can proudly say 5 years, October of now, 2024, a 5 year breast cancer survivor, which completely changed my life because I used to be a complete workaholic. And now I really take, you know, what I really, really want to do. I think my first part of my career was all about achievement. And now later on is all about fulfillment and giving back. But the number one thing I have to do is exercise, work out, spend time with my family and friends is a huge priority for me to have lunch or dinner with them. And that's really, really important to me. But you have to have fun in what you're doing. My stress is a lot lower. I need have to find ways to keep it down, but exercise to me is the best way. Being outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a former recovering marathon runner, right? And oftentimes people would ask me, why do you run so much? And I say, honestly, because it helps reduce stress, right? It really does. I'm not sure how the chemical side of all of that works, but I know for me personally, it helps me to really plan out, my day, and it helps to reduce a lot of the, stresses of life. But definitely appreciate you sharing that story about, kind of your health scare. And it's interesting that, oftentimes it takes, some big event in somebody's life, oftentimes on the health side, before, they're kind of forced almost to kind of realign their perspectives in life and what's important to them. So appreciate you sharing that, with us, as I know it'll resonate with a number of our listeners. So what's next for Pam? What are you focused on as we kind of round out, 2024 and move into 2025? What's on your, bucket list, either personally or professionally?
Well, my number one goal is still to have a national TV show on sharing, tips and trades on anything to do with commercial real estate is a real big passion. And then, like you mentioned, I love to travel and take pictures. So I did something completely different, and I entered one of 4 pictures in the Texas State Fair, and one of my pictures won honorable mention. So I was even happy with that, with all of the entree entries. But I really, spending more time on that travel as I use it, for research to bring new restaurants and retailers to the Texas market. But just really, my hashtag is, living my best life.
Yeah, love that. Congratulations on your picture and the awards there that you won. And obviously, on kind of your pursuit to have a nationally syndicated TV show. That sounds really exciting to me, and something that I'd enjoy, being a part of, if nothing else, other than just to watch, right? Outside of that, what would be maybe 1 or 2 different ways that our listening audience could could learn more about you and connect with you?
For sure, follow me on LinkedIn. That's always a great way, just under Pamela J. Goodwin. And go to, my website is pamgoodwin.com. And feel free to send me an, email at info@pamgoodwin.com if you have any questions about investing in triple net investments.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely put those links in the show notes for this episode. Pam, really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into another episode of The Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.